All right. So are you ready to dive into a world where ancient traditions get a modern makeover? We're talking urban voodoo.
And we're going way beyond those Hollywood stereotypes, the ones with spooky dolls and all that.
We're going to get real, folks.
Real stories, real experiences, and real people using this stuff in their everyday lives.
We're digging into love, protection, even how to deal with a terrible boss, all through this lens of urban voodoo.
Yeah, and to guide us on this journey, we've got Urban Voodoo by S. Jason Black and Christopher S. Hyatt, PhD.
Because let's be honest, there's a ton of misinformation out there about voodoo.
Absolutely. It gets a bad rap, people instantly thinking curses and hexes and all that jazz.
Yeah, like it's all about sticking pins in dolls and whatnot.
Right, but as we'll see, that's not the whole picture, not even close.
So let's dismantle some of those myths right off the bat.
Sounds good to me.
What's the first one we should tackle? What's the biggest misconception you come across?
Well, for starters, people often think of voodoo as this, monolithic thing practiced exclusively by Black communities.
Yeah, I can see that, especially with how it's portrayed in movies and stuff.
Right, but the reality is it's so much more diverse than that.
Oh, really? Tell me more.
So while voodoo has its roots in Africa, it's actually embraced by a huge range of people with a particularly strong presence in Latin America.
Interesting. I never knew that.
It's this blend of traditions taking from African religions, indigenous practices, even incorporating elements of Catholicism.
It's like a fusion of different spiritual influences.
Exactly, and that speaks to just how adaptable and practical urban voodoo can be.
Practicality, huh? Not usually the first word that comes to mind when I think of voodoo, I'll be honest.
And that's exactly the point we're trying to get across.
I'm intrigued. Keep going.
At its core, it's about addressing real-life needs.
Like what kind of needs?
Whether it's finding love, getting some protection, or even, and I love this one, navigating those tricky office dynamics.
Okay, now you're speaking my language.
Right. We've all been there.
Tell me about it.
And in this case, S. Jason Black, one of the authors, he actually used urban voodoo to deal with a difficult boss.
Hold on, are we talking about the same S. Jason Black who literally wrote the book on urban voodoo?
The one and only.
Okay, now this, I've got here, this is like meta, using voodoo to deal with writing a book about voodoo.
Well, not exactly. This is a whole other situation. Imagine this. You're trying to get work done, but your boss is having a day. You know the type.
Oh, I know the type, yelling on the phone, bringing the bad vibes.
Exactly, and it's amazing how one person's bad mood can just tank the whole office,
Seriously, it's like a ripple effect.
And so S. Jason Black, he decides to take matters into his own, let's say, magically inclined hands.
All right, I am hooked. What did he do?
He used something called sympathetic magic, which is actually a principle found in a bunch of magical traditions.
Sympathetic magic. Break that down for me. What are we talking about here?
So it works on the idea that, affects, influencing something by working with something that represents it.
Okay, give me an example. I'm blanking.
Sure. Think of that saying, an apple a day keeps the doctor away.
Okay, so you're using the apple, the symbol of health, to influence your actual well-being.
Exactly. You got it.
I see. So what symbol did S. Jason Black use for his, let's say, energetically challenged boss?
He needed something infused with the boss's energy, something to act as a link.
Like what? A coffee mug? A stapler?
Even better, a handwritten note.
Oh, interesting. So he had a direct link.
Precisely. He takes this note, places it on an altar dedicated to Legba, a spirit often linked to communication and crossroads, and focuses his intention on calming the boss down, getting rid of the disruptive energy.
Wait, so he used a Post-it note to create this, magical connection?
It does sound kind of wild when you put it like that, but according to S. Jason Black, the results were undeniable.
So what happened? Tell me everything.
The very next day, the boss walks in, and he's completely different, quiet, subdued, almost unrecognizable.
Get out of here.
Yeah.
So it actually worked.
That's what he claims, but it gets even more interesting.
More interesting. You're killing me. Tell me more.
So S. Jason Black eventually moves on from that job, stops doing the ritual, and guess what happens?
Don't tell me the boss went back to his old ways.
Bingo.
You're kidding me.
The change was entirely linked to that active ritual. Once the connection was broken, boom, back to square one.
Wow, I don't even know what to say. It's like something out of a movie.
It really makes you wonder about the power of belief,
No kidding. And intention. Did S. Jason Black's belief make it real?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it?
It really is. And you know what else this brings up?
What's that?
That whole idea of energy exchange. like in the spiritual realm.
Oh, absolutely. That's a huge part of it.
Because S. Jason Black, didn't he mention feeling drained after doing this ritual, like he'd given something up?
Yeah, he talks about it being like he forgot to, feed the spirit he called upon, like there's a price to pay.
It's not just about taking, it's about giving back.
Right.
Like maintaining that balance.
Exactly. There's this sense of respect. You don't just ask for what you want and then peace out.
It's about acknowledging that there's this whole other world out there.
Yeah.
And we're not separate from it. We're interacting with it, even if we don't realize it.
And sometimes those interactions, they can get a lot more, shall we say, direct than we might expect.
Like that story you mentioned earlier about S. Jason Black's associate and those stomach pains during a ritual.
Oh, yeah. That's a wild one. It really highlights just how unpredictable these things can be, even for experienced practitioners.
So set the scene for me. What kind of ritual were they doing?
Unfortunately, the book doesn't go into specifics.
Come on, that's no fun.
I know, right? But they were working with, you guessed it, sympathetic magic, focusing energies, setting intentions, that kind of thing.
Okay, fair enough. So they're in the middle of this ritual, and then what?
Out of nowhere, S. Jason Black's associate, she just cries out in pain, clutching her stomach.
Oh no, is she okay?
And these weren't just your average stomach ache. We're talking intense pain, like hospital visit level, intense.
Seriously?
Mm-hmm.
That's scary. Did they ever figure out what was wrong?
That's the weird part. They run all sorts of tests, x-rays, the whole 9 yards, and nothing. No explanation.
You're kidding?
Nope. It just went away as mysteriously as it came on. A few days later, gone.
So what are we supposed to make of that?
Well, the book draws this fascinating parallel to traditional juju stories, those tales of spiritual power and unexplained events.
So even though this happened in a modern context, it still has that connection to those older, more, mystical beliefs.
It's like these traditions are tapping into something ancient, something that goes beyond our current understanding.
It's like opening a door to another dimension, and we have no idea what's on the other side.
Which is both exciting and terrifying, don't you think?
Absolutely. It's like this reminder that the world is full of mysteries, things we might not ever fully understand.
And that's what makes exploring this stuff so fascinating. You never know what you're going to find.
It's like that feeling you get when you're about to explore a haunted house, a mix of anticipation and dread.
Except in this case, the haunted house is, well, reality itself.
I like the way you think, and speaking of reality being stranger than fiction, what about that story about S. Jason Black feeling compelled to buy that specific book?
Oh, man, that one's it really makes you think about synchronicity, and how seemingly random events can actually be connected in ways we don't always see.
Give me the rundown. What happened with this book? So this book, what was it about? What made S. Jason Black pick it up in the first place?
It wasn't really the topic itself, at least not that he was aware of.
What do you mean?
He describes this, overwhelming urge to buy this particular book, even though he hadn't even considered it before.
Whoa, so it was like something was calling him to it.
Exactly. He just couldn't shake this feeling, so he finally just buys the book. And as he starts reading it, bam, all these weird synchronicities pop up, all these connections to his own life, his own exploration of urban voodoo.
You're saying the book was like a mirror, reflecting his experiences back at him.
In a way, yeah. It was like it was speaking directly to him, almost like it knew what he was going through, offering insights that felt tailor-made.
That's wild. Like it was meant for him to find.
The source material connects this to that whole idea of synchronicity, those seemingly random events that are actually connected in ways we don't always understand.
Like those times where you're just like, okay, that's too weird to be a coincidence,
Exactly. And for people who practice urban voodoo, these synchronicities are often seen as messages, signs from the spirit world.
Like you're on the right track, or something big is about to happen.
Yeah, something like that. Little winks from the universe.
Okay, that reminds me, you mentioned this other story, the one with the dove crashing through the window during a ritual.
Oh, yeah, that one's a classic.
I mean, talk about a sign, a dove crashing through the window. That's got to be up there in terms of dramatic synchronicities.
It's definitely up there. So picture this. S. Jason Black is in the middle of a ritual.
Yeah, I'm picturing it. Go on.
And all of a sudden, out of nowhere, this white dove comes crashing through the window, landing right on a tarot card. The devil card, no less.
Hold on. Are you serious? A dove? Like, out of the blue? That's almost too symbolic, even for this conversation.
That's the thing about these stories. They often have this, uncanny symbolism, you
Yeah.
know? You can't help but wonder if there's something more to it.
Like it's not just a random bird flying into a window. There's a message there.
And the fact that it's a dove makes it even more interesting, right?
Because doves are usually associated with peace, purity, that kind of thing.
Exactly. The complete opposite of the devil card. It's like this clash of symbolism, and you're left trying to figure out what it all means.
Like, was it a warning? Or maybe a sign of some powerful spiritual presence?
These are the questions that people who practice urban voodoo are constantly grappling with, trying to find meaning in these seemingly random events, those moments where the veil between the worlds seems to thin out.
It's like they're always looking for those glimpses behind the curtain, you know,
Hmm.
trying to see what's really going on.
And sometimes those glimpses, they can lead down some pretty interesting paths, not always the paths you'd expect.
What do you mean?
Well, we've been focusing on the more personal side of urban voodoo, but there's another side, a darker side, that delves into some pretty intense territory.
Okay, now you got my attention. What are we talking about here?
We're talking about necromancy.
Wait, necromancy, like communicating with the dead.
That's the one.
Okay, that took a turn.
And not just communicating with the dead, but actually working with them, using their energy to achieve specific goals.
I see where the darker side label comes in.
Yeah, this branch of urban voodoo is called Palo Mayombe, and it's definitely shrouded in secrecy, even a bit of taboo.
I can understand why. I mean, even the word necromancy has this like ominous ring to it, like something you'd read about in a scary book.
Right, it conjures up images of dark rituals, forbidden knowledge, that sort of thing.
Exactly. So what makes Palo Mayombe so different from the other practices we've been talking about?
Well, for starters, it uses human remains in its ritual.
Human remains, you mean like actual bones?
Yep, often a skull, finger bones, even a tibia, things like that.
Okay, that's definitely not your average spiritual practice.
These remains are seen as essential components of something called the Ganga.
The Gunga. Okay, what's that?
You can think of it kind of like a cauldron, but not just any cauldron. This one's special.
Special in what way?
It's consecrated through this elaborate ritual process, and it becomes like a microcosm of the universe, a home for the spirits that the Polero, the practitioner, is working with.
So it's not just a container. It's like this like spiritually charged vessel.
Exactly, and there are all these rules and traditions around how the Anga is constructed, involving offerings, chants, even the Polero's own blood.
This is some intense stuff.
It can be, especially when you consider the power that Poleros believe is contained within the Ganga.
Power, huh? So it's not something to be taken lightly.
Definitely not. And to illustrate this power, the source material actually tells this chilling story, a real-life example of what can happen when this power falls into the wrong hands.
Oh man, now I'm really interested. Tell me everything.
So this story is about a man named Adolfo Luis Constanzo, a Polero who became infamous for his involvement in the Mexican drug trade.
Hold on. A drug lord who practiced Palomayombe. That's a combination I didn't see coming.
Yeah, it's pretty wild. And Constanzo wasn't just any practitioner. He was supposed to be incredibly powerful, with influence over some of Mexico's most prominent figures.
Like celebrities, politicians, that kind of thing.
Exactly. And according to reports, he used his magic to protect his drug empire, get rid of his enemies, and gain even more power and wealth.
So he was using Palomayombe for like straight up evil.
That's the accusation. And his story became a huge media sensation, painting a pretty dark picture of what can happen when this kind of spiritual power is misused.
It's like that saying, power corrupts, and absolute power corrupts absolutely.
Right. It's a reminder that magic, no matter how powerful, isn't inherently good or evil. It's all about how it's used.
It's a tool. And like any tool, it can be used for good or for bad.
Precisely. And Constanzo's story really highlights the importance of ethics in any spiritual practice, especially one as potent as Palomayombe.
It makes you think, though, what if someone with good intentions approached Palomayombe? Could it be used for, more positive purposes?
That's a question that's been debated for a long time, and there's no easy answer.
So it's not as simple as saying, this is good magic, or this is bad magic.
Not at all. It's a lot more nuanced than that, just like the world of urban voodoo itself.
It's about recognizing that there's always more to the story, always more to learn.
And that's what makes this exploration so fascinating. There's always something new to discover, something to challenge our assumptions.
Absolutely. And speaking of exploring, for someone listening to this, someone who's maybe a little curious about urban voodoo, is it something anyone can just, decide to try?
That's a great question, and actually the source material addresses that directly.
Oh, really? So what's the verdict? Can anyone give this a shot? So is urban voodoo something anyone can just decide to explore? What does the source material say about that?
It's actually really interesting. It seems to encourage self-initiation, that personal connection to the spirit world.
So you don't necessarily need to be part of a specific tradition or anything like that.
That's the idea. You can find your own way, and there are even some practical steps you can take, drawing from shamanic traditions.
Wait, hold on. Are we talking like a urban voodoo for beginners guide here?
Kind of, yeah. It emphasizes actively seeking that knowledge, that direct connection with the spirits, and it all starts with something called a ritual bath.
Okay, so we're easing into it. No animal sacrifices just yet.
Not quite. This is about cleansing, purifying yourself, getting ready for what's to come.
I see. So it's about setting intentions, creating that sacred space.
Exactly. Shifting your mindset, opening yourself up to the possibility of connecting with something beyond the everyday.
Okay, I'm intrigued. What happens after the ritual bath?
Then you'd go to your altar. Remember, we talked about setting one up for Legba.
Yeah, the spirit of communication, the one who opens those doors.
Exactly. So you invoke Legba, asking for guidance, protection, that kind of thing.
So basically, you're asking for a spirit guide to help you on your journey.
You could say that. And from there, it's about paying attention, keeping a dream journal, noticing any recurring symbols, those synchronicities we talked about.
Those little winks from the universe.
Exactly. And the source material really stresses that this isn't just about intellectual understanding. It's about experiencing it for yourself.
Like those experiences S. Jason Black talked about, encountering spirits, or that thing with the book that was like mirroring his life.
Right. And while those experiences might seem extraordinary, the book suggests that they're not as uncommon as we might think. That potential is there for all of us.
It's a pretty wild thought, isn't it?
Yeah.
That maybe, just maybe, there's a lot more to reality than we realize.
And that by tapping into these traditions, these practices, we might be able to unlock those hidden dimensions.
It's like we're just scratching the surface of what's possible.
And that's the beauty of exploration. You never know what you're going to find.
This whole deep dive has been incredible. I've learned so much. It's been eye-opening, to say the least.
It really makes you look at the world a little differently, doesn't it?
It really does. And for anyone listening who's feeling inspired, what's the best way to keep exploring this stuff?
Well, this deep dive was just a starting point. A glimpse into the world of urban voodoo. There's a ton of information out there, books, websites, even local groups where you can connect with practitioners.
So it's about taking that curiosity and running with it.
Absolutely. And who knows what you might discover along the way.
That's all the time we have for this deep dive into urban voodoo, but the conversation doesn't have to end here.
Keep those minds open, keep asking questions, and never underestimate the power of the unseen world.
Until next time, folks, take care and stay curious.